Good morning. It's 11:40 a.m. on Thursday, May 8th, and this is the regular meeting of the Sandpoint Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Committee, now called to order in council chambers at City Hall, 1123 West Lake Street, Sandpoint, Idaho. For the record, I'm Committee Vice Chair Molly O'Reilly presiding. Also present are committee members Aaron Billings, Jennifer Heller, Reed Weber, and Julie Perchinsky. Here, Kate Huseman is absent. In addition to community members, City Council Liaison Brandon Stegland is with us, and Deputy Clerk Haley Keys. Deb Rule, our council liaison, is not with us right now. At this time, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from our April 10th, 2025 meeting. Is there a motion? Okay, so we have a motion by Julie Perchinsky and a second by Reed Weber. Are there any comments on the minutes? Hearing none, I will make some. It did not make it to this agenda. Who will run the meeting if neither Kate or I are available, and was supposed to be. So perhaps that can be on the agenda next month. And for both 4th Avenue and downtown, the minutes are very vague on what happens. It says the committee people should walk it and send in their comments, but it doesn't say it will come to the committee. But I don't know that staff really wants to hear comments from each committee member who has walked it. So the minutes were ambiguous. So perhaps they can be more precise next time and we can know about those two projects. All in favor of approving the minutes? Aye. Aye. And opposed? So it's unanimous. The minutes are approved as presented. Old business, we have none, but before we proceed, for any members of the public in attendance, if you wish to offer comments on this matter following the staff presentation and board discussion, on any matter following staff presentation and board discussion, please be provided that the city has rules in place for proper decorum during public meetings provided under city code and posted just outside our council chambers. Any comments would need to be relevant to the specific topics we're addressing this morning, afternoon. Please note the public comment opportunities are for comments only. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes. Okay, new business. We will now move on to new business and discuss and vote for the committees to adopt recommendations for intersection improvements at Boyer and Highway 2. Should we not start with a discussion of those recommendations? Jen, would you like to present the recommendations of the intersection committee? Do you?
If we're going to be amending the agenda, we have to do a vote. Or are you talking about the intersection for Boyer?
Well, it says discussion / vote. So it would be a discussion first.
Yeah, you can discuss whatever you'd like, and then we can come forward with a motion and vote from there.
Okay, so we're not changing the agenda.
Okay.
Oh, we'll switch that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's what I printed out.
Yeah. Let's see. 3 of us were involved in this, so I guess this is mostly for Reed and
Speak loudly.
For Reed and Aaron and non-present people. The document was attached to the agenda, so hopefully everyone got to look at it. We tried to recommend some easy things. and some harder things. And, kind of an ancillary thing at the same time. Most of these kind of came up briefly, I think, at the last meeting, but we just kind of put them in clearer writing that hopefully would make sense. I'll run through them real fast, but, if everyone got to look at them beforehand, I think the biggest thing is if there's any questions or changes that we want to make, or if staff have any input on before we make a vote or anything like that. So the biggest thing that we would definitely want to get before staff is that it seems like there may be some signage on Highway 2 that should be 25 and is currently posted as 35. So we kind of want to get that addressed. I believe that's at the end of the document that's currently posted. I think this is the old one.
Well, for short term, we had,
Yeah, for short term, I think this is the first version.
yeah, it doesn't, it
Doesn't
was
have
what
the same word.
was online.
I read one online this morning that was slightly different, and of
Yeah.
course I didn't bring my computer.
See, where would you find it?
Oh, city website.
Okay. There. No,
Start at page 4 of the document that it's the full
I
agenda
thought I had
packet.
moved it.
Maybe that'll work. Or you can just click on that one right there.
Yeah, okay.
Page 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Thanks, Brandon. There we go.
Okay.
This is the one. Perfect. Okay, so short term, repainting the crosswalk. It's kind of, the crosswalks are looking a little weather worn. And I believe one of them is missing completely, but I don't remember which one. And that's probably going to be done anyway seasonally, so that should be a relatively easy thing to do in the short term. The next two kind of could be grouped, but we put them in there separately since they're separate actions. We'd like to have some orange flagging for pedestrians to carry like they do when they cross Fifth, because that would take minimal input and it would make them more visible. We also would like to see mid-street pedestals, like warning pedestrians, kind of like in the middle of the road, like happens on Fifth seasonally. They put the little breakaway, yeah, the little easy installation devices, until the road gets widened. That's probably all that you can do easily as far as putting a physical object in the middle, but it would be relatively easy in theory. Currently, southbound traffic on Boyer does not have any watch for pedestrian signs. Northbound traffic on Boyer heading to the intersection has one sign. We kind of came up with a number of different recommendations with the idea that if we recommend everything, then it'd be nice to have everything, but if at least something gets done, it would probably help. We had some discussion over whether to put, where to put a watch for pedestrian sign, because as you approach Pine, there's a bunch of pedestrian crossings. And then as you approach Highway 2, there's more crossings. So it's almost like you need signage to happen before Pine. But it would be nice if there was some form of like interactive signage where when a pedestrian actually like hits the walk button, activates that, there would be some kind of alert flashing that there's a pedestrian in the crosswalk. Main reason being, like Radley mentioned last time, and like a couple of us have experienced, people come southbound on Boyer at speed, the light turns green, they're like, ooh, I have a protected right turn, and they are coming around that turn fast before they can see that there's a pedestrian who also thinks, oh, I'm green, and they're already halfway out into 2 when that right turning traffic approaches. So having a non-interactive sign would be a step up, but having something that would alert drivers further back when there is an active pedestrian in the intersection would be great. So we have both of those on there to vote on as a complete package. If anyone disagrees, we could simplify it. But we figured we should ask for both and see what happens. Change And we had the same thought with the current northbound Boyer sign coming from Winter Ridge, if it could be interactive, if it could change from just a stationary watch for pedestrian sign to a walk activated, flashing, animated thing for the right turning traffic coming northbound headed towards town. And again, this is dependent on what technology and such we have for those kinds of things. And then the bigger ask on the short-term list is that all left turns at the intersection be protected only. That would require some programming and obviously conversations with ITD and so on. So that's probably the more complex on the short-term list.
Clarify what protected means.
Protected meaning right now, if you approach from any direction, certain cycling when you're on Highway 2 and you're turning off and it's left, sometimes there's the protected left turn where the arrow is green and nothing else is happening in the intersection, and left turn drivers can focus on what they're doing.
Well,
But at
basically,
other times,
yeah.
you have either a flashing yellow arrow when you're on 2 or the green circle when you're going the other directions. And either one of those, you're both yielding to oncoming traffic and turning and theoretically watching for pedestrians. So that one gets demoted to last. So if we can give drivers an easier time turning instead of having
And that would
yield
stop the
options.
walk across. If you had a turn light, it would stop that left-hand
I
walk
think-
light.
Yeah.
You
I-
have
I-
to.
Yeah.
Protect it.
So that would be more complicated to calculate, because then you have to worry about like traffic backing up to so on. But it would be simpler and safer.
Do we want to discuss the short term and then the long term, or do we want to deal with both at the same time?
It's a good question. We could stop here and
Yes,
discuss the
if
short
there's
term
any
stuff.
questions.
Right. And I think we have a visitor who would like to comment on this one. And Brad, why don't you move close enough that the owl will pick up your audio? And Brad Smith is a visitor today and interested in this as he commutes through this intersection on his bike.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Brad Smith, I'm a city resident. I think in my opinion, first of all, I'm glad this is on the agenda because in my opinion, the biggest issue in the city for especially pedestrians, but also to a lesser degree cyclists is the Highway 2 intersections through town. But especially Boyer. And that's because of the unprotected left turns going in every direction in that intersection. If you're north and southbound, it's particularly bad because of the green circle yield on green left turns. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen people come up to the left turn lane and on green, they don't see the pedestrian cyclist coming and they cut them off or almost hit them. And even from a motorist standpoint, people frequently take a left and immediately cut in front of oncoming traffic and don't understand that they're actually supposed to yield to oncoming traffic. So even from a motorist perspective, it's super dangerous. And the ideal solution there would be that all those turns would be protected. I know that's a challenge with ITD because they're always focused on cars and they want to minimize, cars queuing at the intersection, but that is a huge hazard for pedestrians and cyclists. And that's, I think, the biggest thing the city could do to improve the situation for pedestrians and cyclists anywhere in town. To a lesser degree, the intersections at Larch and Fifth are also problematic. Those have unprotected blinking yellow left turns, which is a little better than the yield on green because at least people are seeing the flashing yellow arrow and understand better that they need to yield both to oncoming traffic and to pedestrians. But when you activate the crossing signals, the left turn is also activated at the same time for motorists. So, you know, a motorist could miss a pedestrian or cyclist and hit them. And with those types of situations, and actually any of those intersections, another thing that could be done would be to have some lead time where when the crosswalk is activated, there's, you know, a certain number of seconds at least where the pedestrian or the cyclist can get out before the traffic signal is activated. So at least they would, you know, the pedestrian or the cyclist would be far enough out there that people could hopefully at least see them. So that's another thing to consider, but yeah, the Highway 2 situation, in my opinion, is the like biggest thing you could do in town to like improve the situation for cyclists, and pedestrians.
Thank you. Does everybody feel like they understand all the recommendations and particularly this one
The short term list.
on the short-term list? Thank you. And Brandon, have you any suggestions or comments? You may see some engineering countermeasures that we've missed.
I would just say in bigger picture, my one comment would be, it's great to, you know, make these suggestions about potential solutions, but, my opinion would be that the best way for this committee to get things done would be primarily to identify issues and, try to convince the powers that be in city administration to investigate potential solutions to those issues. So I do just want to say that for the record. Specifically about these recommendations, I don't have really a problem necessarily specifically with all of them. Other than I'm gonna move into the long term, sorry, can I?
You can pause.
The one thing about the long term, is changing the crosswalk, from a short, perpendicular crosswalk to a long, twice as long diagonal crosswalk. I'm not sure I agree with that from an engineering perspective. If any of you have ever tried to cross, the other stoplight at Division and Highway 2, we're basically talking about recreating that. I would argue that that's much more dangerous than the one that we have at Boyer and Highway 2. If you've ever tried to cross, particularly on the west side of that intersection, crossing the highway, it takes a really long time for pedestrians to get across it, and the drivers taking a right heading southbound on Division get super angry that it takes so long for a pedestrian to get across it. And I also don't agree that pedestrians will be more visible to people turning right southbound on Boyer. If the crosswalk was closer to the intersection, I actually think that they would be less visible to pedestrians because the cars would have a sight visibility issue because the pedestrians would be in their blind spot. That's the only specific one I really wanted to point out. Also, just to be aware, I think, you know, I really like how these are ordered in the order of, you know, easiest to implement, down to, you know, the bigger asks. I think that's great. The first two, I think, are easy ones. Repainting the crosswalk and adding orange flags, those are something staff can just attempt to do, right off the bat. The other ones, as you mentioned, that takes ITD's involvement. And specifically when we're talking about making major changes to intersection timing or doing something that I would call intersection improvements at the intersection, I think the most appropriate way to get that done would be to get it in a council as a project in an adopted master plan, which means council would adopt it. Council speaks for all citizens. That's the most effective way to get something like that done. Unfortunately, you know, it's not something that will just get done, you know, this year or next year. The way that we operate is we want to get major or moderate projects in a master plan adopted by council so that staff has clear direction from the city leadership that this is the project that we want you to focus on. So this is a good start, and we can use this as a guidebook as we start doing that next round of master plan. So those are my comments on this.
Okay,
Do we want to try to, Dennis, you. Do we want to try to vote on them separately or?
Sure,
do we
let's-
Try.
yeah, let's vote on the ones we've discussed and then discuss the others. How does that seem to everybody? And is there any more discussion after hearing Brandon? We're on the short-term improvements to Boyer Highway 2
Okay.
from the intersection committee.
I'll just throw it up there because it might relate to the two phases. Considering 7-second lead time or just whatever, considering a lead time for pedestrians. The intersection and the light turn. I think they're also looking at controlled turns. Phase 1, if we propose that they do this. I think it'd also be worth considering
Trying to combine those.
those 2 and 1, bumping that up into this.
So you're thinking maybe a 7-second lead time should move up into short-term?
The light changes or like the
Yeah.
protector, what?
Right, but the protected left
Yeah,
could be also considered at that same.
okay,
phase.
Or
To
conversely, we could, I mean, maybe not preferred, but left turn reprogramming is still reprogramming. It's still gonna involve ITD and all that. So maybe combine left turns with that. But I see what you're saying. Consider them all at once instead of two.
Yeah, so. Second phase.
I do think we should leave them separate items because ITD might say yes to one and no to one.
Yeah, maybe not combining, but
But moving, okay, so Reed, maybe I would record a motion from you to accept the recommendations from the subcommittee as recommendations from the full committee or short-term improvements to the Boyer Highway 2 intersection with the addition of 7-second lead time for pedestrian crossing light move to short-term. Okay, would that be your motion?
motion to, motion,
You can just say, so moved.
so moved.
As long as it's been articulated, you can just go, yes. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay, Jen has seconded that motion. Is there any more discussion? Okay, all in favor? Okay, unanimous. Thank you. Well presented, Jen. A nice discussion. Thank you, Brandon. Okay,
Sorry. Did we have any printed agendas? I didn't print.
Sorry, they're on the table.
and
I'll make that. I'm gonna get them.
okay, so then we'll move on to the longer term. Jen, why don't you bring them over here?
I'm gonna take off, but thank you for hearing me out today.
Brad, thank you for coming. We appreciate it.
Okay, long term, we have briefly mentioned the now short-term thing of lead times. It sounds like probably everyone understands that concept, so I'll probably just skip that. For anyone who's not present, lead times are when a pedestrian would activate a walk button and the walk button gives the pedestrian, as the lights change to allow cars through, the walk button lets the pedestrians proceed first so that they end up partially into the intersection before the cars begin to be allowed to go. So walk is activated prior to a green light. So that's what we have just moved to short term. Move the crosswalk between, these are gonna be things that Brandon was talking about. The current intersections, the two crosswalks that are oriented mostly north and south, headed across Highway 2 are currently at diagonals from the true corners slightly. So kind of southeast on the east side and kind of similar orientation on the bike path side. This allows for a shorter crossing distance, which a lot of studies do prove, like Brandon's saying, shorter distance, safer for pedestrians. They are through the intersection quicker. And that's probably why it got built that way. However, for the right turns for northbound and southbound traffic, there's these wide turn radiuses. And when trucks come to the intersection at speed and get a green light and don't have to come to a full stop before proceeding into the intersection, they haven't come to finish their braking, they can often excitedly hit the gas and come around that corner real fast. And at the true corner, pedestrians would be visible before they are making that turning option. Whereas now, if someone has already started halfway across that diagonal, it takes a minute for the pedestrian to come into the truck's view, or I keep saying truck because trucks are scary to walkers, but a car is still scary. Any size vehicle coming around that corner, all of a sudden there's a person that's already right in their way as they come around. And so long term, when the intersection gets redesigned, our suggestion is that we lengthen the crosswalk and make the pedestrians leave from a place that is visible to drivers. Brandon expressed a reservation that it may block drivers' point of view as they're looking for that turn. So again, this is probably something that will not be done before there is a more involved redesign of the intersection, which is why we put it in long term, but it was something that we wanted to make a case for. So that's probably all I'll say on that, unless anyone has any questions or more feedback than already offered. And then I know we have a lot to get through. In pavement lighting, pipe dream, it'd be super cool to have lights in the roadway, but it creates huge plowing and other maintenance concerns and issues. Just in dusky times or in winter or in low lighting, having something that indicates the crosswalk, both for as drivers are approaching the intersection and maybe something, I think there's ones that can be activated when a walk button is pushed, but then you're adding a whole nother level of complexity. So we kept it short and put it on there as a pipe dream, but that would be fairly involved. So that's it for long term. Any discussion, any questions, any feedback?
I will say it's not necessarily a bad thing to dream big. That's kind of that would be a good thing for, this committee. Don't feel like the suggestions you're making, if it's not guaranteed that they're gonna get done, still make them. I think it's good to get that out. The community. And I also just want to clarify, when I say like I disagree with it, that's just my engineering opinion. I still think it's appropriate if this committee wants to make those recommendations. If you feel as a group that you want to make that recommendation, it's good to get that in the record. So that again, when we go to actually formally try to put intersection improvements more generally at this intersection into a master plan, which this intersection almost certainly will be in the next version of the multimodal master plan. It's good to have that on the record that these are the bike ped committee recommendations. Maybe there's another set of recommendations in a year or two. That stuff can be recorded and then it'll be part of the findings as we present it to council to try to get it adopted. Have the whole community adopt what they want to see at that intersection. So.
Which brings up a good question that I have no idea. You say recorded, say we pass these and it goes to mayor to go to staff, where do these hang out? Is there where's the library of recommendations?
So right now, the clerk is gonna keep the minutes from all committees and all council meetings and all, You know, it's in the public record and it's available on our website. And it's probably in several other places that I'm not aware of.
Okay.
And these recommendations probably won't go directly to the mayor. They'll just, for now, since council has not specifically directed this committee to look at any of this stuff, they will, I think that it's more appropriate that they just go to staff. And then, you know, I will share it with the Public Works Department. And we will know about it and we'll have it on the record. So we'll just be aware of it so that when we go to, you know, when we go to start that process of trying to implement a master plan, we're aware of it. And you know, the committee members here will remember it hopefully when it gets to that point and it's public. And you'll know that, hey, we need to pull the minutes. Cause I remember that the bike ped committee made specific recommendations for this intersection. Direct staff to pull those minutes, get them all. Does that make sense?
We were asked,
Said a comment.
Go ahead.
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you. And the agendas are usually attached, so you can go back through the agendas and look really quick because you're not gonna remember it was our
Which
meeting or
right.
whatever. But if you go through agendas real quickly, you'll be like, oh, that's the one, if you want to go back and listen to it or do whatever. So it will be more accessible than it has been historically, because we didn't used to record all of the sound. So you can really get the details and reacquaint yourself when it does come up further down the road. And then the other thing is that I've been, as things present themselves throughout council, Holly came up, who's our public works, last night and gave us a brief little update. And she happened to bring up inventorying the flags, how they disappear at different intersections, where they are on Fifth Avenue and also at the Pine Street crossing. And so that was my opportunity when she was finished with that statement to say, oh yeah, hey, bike committee's been talking a lot about wanting flags at the Boyer intersection. So I'll keep interjecting on the council when Public Works or Brandon, when something he's bringing up anyway that they're actively doing, so that we keep staying present, if that helps. So I'm hoping as she inventories that we'll just see those flags pop up at the intersection as a part of them doing the spring step. So.
thank you.
And at the council meetings, you relay a summary of what happened here anyways.
I get a
I've heard.
written summary, and so I relay like more in a bullet point fashion. The mayor doesn't want us to reiterate everything we talked about.
Right.
Unless it's maybe appropriate to an item on the agenda where we are deep into doing an intersection or something.
We were asked to look at the master plan. So if there could be some heading somewhere that some bin to throw things in that might apply to the master plan, that would be great. Because that is one of the things that Jason would ask us to do. First meeting, I think. First or second. Yeah. Okay, so we have our long-term recommendations. Yes. Is there a motion to approve those in a second, and then we would discuss them? Minus the one that's moved up.
I'll motion to approve.
Okay, Julie
Second.
and Jen. Okay, discussion. Okay. Great.
I'll move to,
All in favor?
I,
Okay.
Aye.
Unanimous? Thank you very much. Okay. And
do
then
we
we
want to vote on the miles per hour signage separately? Or do we want to include that as,
let's,
I mentioned it first, so I was out of.
yeah. Another recommendation that Jen mentioned was that it appears that the speed limit on Highway 2 between
division.
and Boyer is actually 25 miles an hour, but it's signed 35.
How do we know that?
I keep told. Yeah, I heard back by TD and he said all the
Who
time.
was it?
It was Brandon Probst, not Brandon, I'm sorry, you're Brandon.
Nathan Hurst?
Nathan Hurst. Yeah, it's close. Probst.
Did he put that in writing?
Yes, he did. He sent me an email. Do you want me to send it to you, Brandon?
Yes,
Well,
I'm very interested. in seeing
Yeah, cause he just off the cuff said, oh, it should all be 25 in town. It can't be 35. I said, no, and then I sent him the pictures of the 35-mile-an-hour speed limits through town, cause that's what we talked about at our meeting. So, yes, I'll send it to you, Brandon.
And
So Brandon, do we need to do anything or is this something you'll just follow up on? Where are we?
If you send me that email, it'll remind me to follow up on
Yeah.
it. What I'd like to do is if, I'll do some more digging with ITD and try to get somebody higher up than Nathan Herbst to confirm that. If that's really the case, what I'd like to do is just get it on a city council agenda and just say, hey, listen, here's the record. ITD tells us we have it in writing. It's supposed to be 25. Council, can we take a shot and just switch? I mean, you gotta realize, like, not everybody, I think everybody in this room has a common goal of, we're kind of focused on bike and pedestrian safety. I think that's safe to say, but you gotta realize that not everybody in the community is, so it's probably more appropriate that we daylight it instead of
Absolutely.
you know, and let council make that decision. Cause you may have people saying, well, you know, I don't want it to be 25 because I drive in from Laclede to go to work out in Ponderay every day. I don't want my commute to take an extra 60 seconds. It's gonna destroy my life.
I'm very happy to deal with it semi-informally, if you'll just promise us to let us know if it's gonna be on the council agenda.
Let's follow up what
Yeah.
happens with.
Yeah,
So like the clerk can let us, or you can email us and say, hey, it'll be on this
I
agenda.
could put it on the agenda.
Yeah, when we get to that point, we'll do that.
okay, thank you.
I will look into it. If you send me that email, that'll prompt me to start putting it on my list. Remind me if it drops off my list. There's a lot going on at City Hall. I can't guarantee you that I'm.
Okay, why don't
So
put a standing item on our agenda just
To check
to
in.
let us know what's going on with that. Is that possible? And that'll just be a reminder, then none of us will forget.
Brandon, on the bottom.
Okay.
If you would just.
So
forward it
moving-
to me.
just because when you come into town on Highway 2 over by the Safeway and the old motel, the mile per hour sound is correct over there and it says 25.
Yes.
As
okay.
opposed to when you come in on the other end of the state highway, so that is
Yes,
interesting to me. So anyway,
I was surprised when 35 was up there. He says it's been the same all along, and I guess when I moved back to town, I would walk across there and think, people are sure coming fast down that.
And it would help down at the Dairy Depot
Yes,
crossing
yes,
if they're not
absolutely.
going 35.
yes.
I
if
also
it's
just
20
drove from Boise all the way up Highway 95 and every small town I went through is 25 miles an hour on
Through
that
the
state
town.
highway. So,
And that's helpful, Brandon, for you to know that. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, I want to keep us moving. We've got a lot of substance today and so now the committee regarding various ongoing private development projects. And Jen, you did a stunning job. Would you do that again, please?
Oh,
Unless somebody else wants to report?
I can. Do you want to do the talking?
You guys were the ones that did have to work on that.
Okay, so we had primarily four developments. We went through. Molly did a good job, resorted stuff that is currently in there and brought a short list of about 4 to the subcommittee that we might want to discuss. And then the subcommittee met a few weeks ago and 3 of us were present and we went through those. Some of the recommendations are really simple and some of them are a little complicated and some of them might be able to be punted, given information I've heard since then. So I think the most time crucial one is the Farm Flats, AKA whatever it's now called. Is there an update on the name? It's still Farm Flats? Okay.
It's the unnamed project. They've
The-
committed to naming it something else
Okay,
with,
all right,
with respect to the farm and family or something,
Yeah.
but.
okay.
Does
I
everybody
don't think
have
there's
the
any-
recommendations or do we need to be reading them out?
I will probably briefly summarize them, but hopefully everyone got them before the meeting. They were in the packet. For that project to work well, they are trying to build, Brandon did a great job introducing us to it last time. There was one, now 2 lots on Church Street that want to be multiple units of lower priced, is what I've heard, housing, mostly studio apartments, no parking. Our job, as Molly did an excellent job reiterating several times over the last month, is to make sure that if there is no parking, we need to make sure that people can walk around their homes and bike easily. So we have 2 recommendations, 2 primary recommendations for that project for the developer. After looking at it, part of the reason we are submitting all of these recommendations, not just this one, is these are things that we did not see necessarily in code. So we have long-term notes on our notes spreadsheet of thoughts that we might want to pursue getting into code if possible, or investigating further, like how code lays things out. Just having more proposals for long-term development. But for this particular project, these are things that we don't think are required, but we thought might be merited. So the first part is request that the developer ensure full, well-lit pedestrian access to living units from the front sidewalk. The phase 1, the building 1, has a commercial space in the front. We were having a hard time telling how much of the residential or occupants access would be through the commercial area versus through separate areas. And we were concerned, now that there are 2 buildings, about lighting and accessibility between the 2 buildings. At night, it's gonna get really dark in there, but if you have really garish lights, it's gonna feel awful as well. So there just needs to be some like thought put into like how people will be moving around those 2 buildings and how they will be getting to and from the sidewalk, with the alley being undeveloped in the back, particularly for anyone who might be somewhat less mobility, a little bit more mobility challenge. Well, I shouldn't say more important, but equally, the biggest thing that we kept coming back to is bike parking. One of the buildings has an indoor bike parking section. I believe it's the bottom floor of phase 2. Phase 1, we didn't see any except outside next to the commercial space. And we were concerned that that might be reserved for commercial space customers, but not for residents. If you're gonna have 90 units of people that are supposed to be walking and biking around town, they need places to put their bikes that are safe, dry, accessible, and so on. A lot of particularly young people or mobile people actually have 2 or 3 bikes these days. I know people who have 5+. That would probably be an exception. That probably wouldn't be necessarily what's going in here, but probably the developers should try to make sure that there's at least 1 bike space per unit somewhere on the property. Indoors is great, and it's good that they've got some in there, but we couldn't tell from the design if it would actually accommodate that many bikes. And then we wanted to encourage them to consider the fact that if these people are doing most of their biking and walking as their primary mode of transport, you need to consider things like e-bikes that take more bike parking space, or panniers, baskets, accoutrements. Like if you're actually biking to the grocery store to get your groceries, your bike is gonna end up much wider going in and out of doorways, and when you're parking it and when you're moving it. So that needs to be part of their thought process. It's not just gonna be a skinny little bike coming in and out of the space.
Now, here's a place for me to ask, does the committee want to vote on each of these individually, whether to accept the recommendations? Or do you want to vote on all 4 that we recommended at once?
I think we should do one by one.
What's best?
I think you could probably just pile them together. I mean, if you get.
Unless you heard
Yeah, unless somebody rude
somebody did say,
wanted to say something about one or something.
yeah, I don't like that.
Well, we could do it following parliamentary procedure. If we're gonna do all, we have a motion and a second, and then discussion. And then
Oh,
if anybody wants changes, and I actually have one already, then that motion can be amended. And we vote on the amendment, and then the motion, and yeah, but I would keep going. Okay. So the second one, thank you, Jen, is the brewery on North Boyer. And,
Brandon, I'm really curious on this one. And this was our reading on it, is that there's an old plan. They're going back to an old plan. There's documents from like 2008, and they're resuming a plan. So is that true?
Yeah, what happened in 2008 is irrelevant, you know,
Okay.
that, you know, once they abandon a building permit or a permit process,
It's done.
you know, they can use the same drawings. They're not
Okay.
gonna prevent them from that, but we look at it as if, you know, you submit all new application materials. I mean, certainly, you know, 10, 20 years ago, you have to submit all new application materials. That's what the record is.
Okay.
So,
Because we saw some of those old materials resurfacing, but we weren't entirely sure what their role was, if it was still like continuing off of that, or if it was. The only thing we had to comment on that property was that the current plans that are posted don't really seem to have sidewalk on the west side of Boyer. Coming down across the frontage. And we would like to see that, and we saw references to that in the old documents, so we're like, well, are we wasting our time trying to bring this back up? Is this already gonna be a thing, or
yeah, they're not gonna build sidewalk there. They're gonna pay the in lieu fee
they are,
for that project. And the building permit's already been issued, so.
it's
Oh,
pretty
it's a
much
done deal.
Yeah.
Well, there's no sidewalks either. Going either direction from it, are there?
Yes, there's,
On that side.
well, there will be.
Not for a while. Oh.
There
Are
are
they gonna
some
finish
where
up?
the new, I don't wanna call it a cement fence, but brickwork
Yeah,
fencing
That
is,
is, that's
that,
development, yes.
that's.
It stops right there.
It actually has one, yeah.
Or does it,
Yeah.
yeah, can't remember.
But on
if they
the
put it
east
in or not.
side, isn't it mostly sidewalk except for that one little portion?
Yes.
Yes,
Mostly-
it's,
The famous missing portion.
Mhm.
that's a property owner's
Yeah.
problem.
But I thought that was in the works.
Yeah, so
I wrote a letter to help with a grant for that.
yeah.
It may be. But on the west side, I mean, it was such a priority of city council for so long to get sidewalk on, or pathway on both sides of Boyer. Now, we seem to be doing more in lieu than sidewalk on the west side. And it's not a street that you want to just be crossing because your sidewalk gave out. And I wonder, does city council still care about sidewalk up there?
It's almost as exciting as parking, so, it's constantly in a stage of fluctuation and what are the pros and cons of any way that you approach it or address it? So that's a long, long conversation. Yes, absolutely. We care about it. There's, and just depending on who's on the council at that particular time frame, you know, things have changed and sort of changed back and then taken a different version and, you can go in and read the code as it is now and, you know, inform yourself more on how it's supposed to work. Doesn't mean it's working as well as we want it to work, maybe not. Yeah, I don't know how to really
Thank you.
answer that question, other than council keeps trying to make it better, so it happens, and sometimes they do better, and sometimes it seems like it's worse.
Okay, thank you.
Is it, we keep this in here even if it is not going to
Well, we'll see
do?
how the
Exactly.
motion is made, but I would suggest that we make it known that we think there should be sidewalk. Even if that's not what's gonna happen. Why not?
Well, the more you voice your opinion about how the code is working now to council, that would potentially push them towards relooking at that yet again.
Okay, thank you. All right. So then the Boyer,
Is that reasonable, Brad? Is that-
agreed, yeah, totally agree. I don't, yeah, there's no harm in,
See,
if this is what you know,
Agree upon.
this is what you want to comment on this development. It's not like you're gonna get in trouble because you made a comment after the building.
all right,
It's really what the point of the committee is in a lot of ways.
Okay, so the industrial park, the Boyer Meadows.
However, can I just interject though, on that same topic though? So going back to the apartments on Church.
Mhm.
So this is the right opportunity to be making those comments, because what I'm thinking, and I can't guarantee this, but we're gonna be rushing to get a staff report done that addresses how they comply with city code. You know, we go through and we explain whether they comply or don't comply with city code before we bring it to P and Z and council. In this case, the plan right now is to bring that to planning and zoning on the 20th. That's the next planning and zoning meeting. My goal is to take the comments from that you adopt to that on that specific one on the record and put it in the staff report. The same way that we do with public comments. So we will include public comments and, you know, if we won't address every single one line by line, but if, you know, on this one, there's gonna be 100 comments about not allowing parking, for example. So we'll address that issue that got brought up by public comments. And my goal on this one is to address those in the staff report. These, so
Thank you.
it will be useful, I guess.
Right.
Um,
Thank you.
All right.
Point of interest, if anybody's really interested and wants to be more educated on the parking piece of that, I know we are bike ped. But go back and watch last night's council meeting just for that small clip. Jason did an exceptional, probably one of the best presentations, really getting to the nitty gritty on parking that I've sat and listened to. So there's a lot of other stuff in that meeting, but scroll to that part and it will be very educational, especially on how our parking is used and not used within the city.
I keep hearing that, you know, it's parking, so it doesn't have to do with, you know, but I think parking has a lot to do with bikes and
Oh, you have to
pedestrians,
walk.
Yes.
right? Especially downtown.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. You don't want to. We're good. Okay, Boyer Meadows Industrial Park.
This was one where we thought it might be a good code exploration down the road. There's parking for more than 20 cars. It is an industrial park. Is bike parking required? It's non-contiguous. We didn't see any bike parking on there.
Yeah, my understanding is that it is required through the code, even in industrial, or even in the zone that they're in. Um, so the planning department basically makes those findings. My understanding is that they have made that a condition. So sometimes when we're going through these, in this case, it's a site plan permit, so it's engineering and zoning review. They get approval and then they can go to building permit and then it's just complying with the building. So there are some cases where they get, you know, we tell them revise and resubmit, they come back with a new plan, revise and resubmit. And they get to the point where they're 99% of the way there, and there's some minor things left that can just be added as a condition of approval. Say, okay, these are the approved plans. However, one of the conditions is you got to provide X amount of bike parking. And I believe that's how planning is going to approach it.
Okay.
So that's all I can say on that. We have not issued the permit yet. There are some engineering issues that they still have not worked out with me, but at least on that side, I believe it's taken care of.
Sweet.
Great.
Excellent.
Okay.
That's easy. Any questions? No.
And
Okay.
And that was the airport area, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just west
Industrial.
of the cul-de-sac, the new Maverick Court, Madison. Sorry, yeah, Madison.
Yeah, the one we talked about before.
Madison.
I just want to make sure I'm listening to the right.
okay, then Milbraith multifamily.
Before we go into depth on this one, I asked Brandon some questions the other day, and he said that this one is kind of perpetually in process. For sake of time, since we have half an hour left, I might ask if we bring this back up next time.
Do we have time? Or would these shape the redesign, our recommendations?
I think that's a good a good call. We can circle back to it. There's nothing pressing on, I haven't heard anything on that development in months. And so that's probably a good idea.
So it's not gonna leapfrog us.
So I'd like to bring
I
that
hope-
back next time.
Right.
Yeah. And then we can do this one, which was on the agenda from last time. So our last one, this was put on the agenda at our last meeting. And Molly did a good job at coming up with some very specific recommendations.
This is the GN,
This is the one by the airport.
Okay. So I was getting those.
Yeah,
Woodland
I think
Drive.
we're- But this is the one that's next to the, what I call it, Amazon, but you know, the,
Bulldog project is what they
Yes.
call it.
there we go, that one. So yeah, this is the one next to that. And Molly, if you want to present this, because I
sure.
get what you're, it's,
And I'll just read through and you yell, stop, stop if you have questions, okay? Wire programs. Already?
no,
In both directions on south side of the corner of Woodland and the new north-south road. Curb ramps in both directions at 2 internal T intersections with the ability to cross the north-south and east-west streets with ramps at the corner and across the street without a corner. So T intersections often get forgotten for curb ramps, but people who need them really need them there. Provide a minimum 6-foot wide pedestrian bicycle connection to the new trunk roadway in the phase 2 subdivision between lots 6 and 7 and phase 1, proposed lots 20, 21 and phase 2, or a nearby couplet. So they've got 2 phases with no connection for walking and biking between them proposed at this point. And require a 5-foot planting strip snow storage between roadway and sidewalk. And after construction on any lot, which will include a driveway cut, ensure sidewalk still meets all city standards and require repair if not. Require buildings have direct connections to sidewalks that are not through driveways. Require bicycle parking at each building, convenient to the main entrance or inside for employees, not allowing park bikes to intrude on pedestrian access. So those are things that kind of came off checklists. Okay, so we have taking out Millbrae, however one says it. We have 4 developments in process with recommendations. Do we have a motion to approve those?
That's a general question before.
Yeah.
voting. Some of these projects are moving on to planning and stuff.
Speak loudly so that Owl picks you up.
Yeah, should I vote on these items? That's a great question that I didn't think of till just now. It may be best to not vote on it. just
Yes, I would
stay-
say because you have to vote on that. You don't want to risk having to remove yourself from that. So
Just abstain. Yeah, thank you. Okay. So you won't be making any motions or seconds on this one.
That's not a quorum though.
No,
Does it have
he's
to be
still
for
part
this?
of us.
Right.
He's just
abstaining.
voting from, but thank you.
Can I,
Question?
before we make a motion, I just need clarity on provide a 6-foot wide minimum pedestrian bicycle connection to the new trunk roadway in phase 2 sub, I don't know what that one means. Can anyone clarify that for me?
As it looked online, there's this first group, and then there's another phase 2 over here. And there's no connection
No.
between the two.
There's no phase over there. That's an existing subdivision.
That phase 2 is existing.
Well, it's not even part of this. It's a totally different. Inside that gate, that's already a subdivision right now.
I don't know about the gate.
Or I mean a fence,
Oh.
you know.
Is it Great Northern? Yeah,
So that's the air park subdivision where they can drive planes on the roadway.
okay,
So then there won't be pedestrian access there.
okay. If
I mean, there may be, I'm just saying,
if it's something really
I wanna
completely
clarify.
different. Yeah, so I was looking just online. I didn't go out there.
Mhm.
And it looked like there were a couple lots that were just offset a little bit, and it wasn't clear that this actually, since this is phase one and that's phase two, that that was built. Well, quick, before it gets built, let's make sure we can get between the two. You're saying this is a built out, different whole thing.
Yeah, like the subdivision's done, they haven't built all the buildings yet. That was a subdivision that was completed.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
All right, so is there a motion to approve these recommendations, minus the provision in Great Northern to provide the bike ped connection to the other phase?
I believe
Julie?
too. Second.
Okay. And then I would like to go back to Farman and suggest, I stood in the building next door and looked at the existing house, will be torn down, and realized that if that new building is dark on that side, it's gonna cut out all the light from the medical practice next door. And then it occurred to me that if these two buildings, not very distant, are really dark on their sides, it's gonna be a tunnel between them, no matter how you light it. So I would like to suggest an amendment that adds that the sides of the buildings be white or off-white, light color. So their front, their back can be anything they want, but that the sides be light colored to make it safer for people walking and riding their bikes between there.
Sorry, which project was this? Just so I have it for the minute.
Yeah, it's
Farm
Farman
Farman
Flats Buildings
Thank
1
you.
and 2.
or not, no name.
Yeah, no name.
Yeah.
Good.
Used to
Thank
be. We have it as Farman Flats. So I move to amend to add that recommendation that the buildings be light colored sides for bicycle pedestrian safety.
Even just the first floor, and just the sides.
Just the sides. It's also going to add a lot of light internally for people living, which isn't our purview, but it will have many benefits, and it will make the building to the east of it not nearly as dark after this is built, because light will reflect off the building rather than being sucked into it.
You can make the recommendation, but.
Who knows?
Yeah, so
Code wise and,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's a private thing, but I don't think it's a bad recommendation because maybe the builder or the developer looks at it, and goes, I didn't think about that. Maybe that will work and maybe I want to do that, but
Yeah,
it's just a recommendation.
it's just
so
a
I wouldn't have high
recommendation.
hopes,
well,
but-
yeah, and also, something like that, that may just be more of a matter of personal opinion, if the bike ped committee recommends that and then they change it, and then 90% of the citizens say, I don't want a bright white reflective wall shining onto these other buildings. Maybe the neighbor thinks that too. And I'm not saying don't make that recommendation, just more of a guidance for like future recommendations. I think the best way to think about these is always start by trying to find a section of the city code that allows you to justify making that recommendation. That holds way more weight. Or in the comp plan, that's another really good one to reference.
Well, the
So-
building that's there now is white.
Yeah.
So I was looking at a white building outside next door.
So I'm just saying though,
Oh, if this were dark,
the ones that are just like a matter of opinion are, I'm not saying don't make the recommendation. It's just, it's a lot harder for staff to implement or even recommend to them because we have no justification to bring it to them. So, for what it's worth, that's my 2 cents.
yeah. So you guys want to go out on a limb a little bit or, well, if somebody does, they would second my motion to amend. Hmm? If not, my motion to amend just dies.
Probably.
Probably dies. Fair enough. Okay, all right, so we have a motion to approve with one deletion. The recommendations,
Technically two, we deleted one section.
one section and one bullet point. Thank you. Millbrae family, multifamily went away and a 6-foot pedestrian bicycle connection went away in the GN Commerce subdivision. Okay, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Okay, 4 yes, 1 abstain. And we don't have on our form, Haley, an abstention.
I have it.
But
There's still a discussion after
what's that?
motion,
After the motion.
after the motion.
Yeah, we did discuss.
Oh, okay,
Well,
that's fine. No, that's all right.
and I moved to amend.
She added the amendment.
Maybe we didn't. Did I give
I think
everybody
we
a
were done
chance?
discussing.
Is everybody feeling comfortable? Okay.
We got 15
The
minutes.
last thing I want to do is run over anybody. Okay. Okay, phase 3 of the
That's MTM.
downtown revitalization project. Reed, you're on that committee, right? Do you need my screen in front of you?
Can you present on this?
I've got it right there.
Are you able to? In a minute.
Sure.
The last meeting. Okay, I can speak to it here. Okay. So. The last meeting we discussed having some overarching. Goals, kind of not specific recommendations for the phase 3. Downtown plan, but adding this to. Voting on this to then go to staff and. Form the design team. Down the road. And I go through each one of these items. General here on what we recommend. Item number 1 is safe multimodal intersections to ensure that intersections safely accommodate bicycle and pedestrian traffic in all directions. Number 2 is pilot temporary solutions to test temporary accommodations for bicycles. Pedestrians were feasible before committing permanent resources. Dedicated bike lanes. In the plan. And then separation of modes of traffic whenever possible, creating a physical barrier between bicyclists, pedestrians, and physical and vehicular traffic. And they made some more general goals to considering high return on investment enhancements, such as painting and signage to really accommodate pedestrian infrastructure. Connection to existing bike routes, so going off Oak Street that we've called off outside of this plan. Then roundabout at Cedar at First and Superior. Proposing to consider that in the design. No, it's actually, I think, outside of the district there, the scope, but it'd be best just to put that in the record that we.
Yeah.
It's a good,
Scopes can change.
Yep.
And with the flashing beacons, pedestrians at the roundabout.
right, including flashing beacons. About dedicated lanes. Traffic. Bicycles and pedestrians where possible. Tighter turning radiuses. Strive for a consistent curb radius of approximately 8 feet at intersections.
And I would say that ought to be 12. 12 is what we currently have in the city. I was using it wrong.
Yeah. Changing that to 12. And then speed reduction measures, considering those in the design, traffic. And then larger trail and pathway connectivity should be considered to connect to the Long Bridge, City Beach, and Sand Creek Trail. Brief overview of each topic or each item.
So I just want to say, like, I think these recommendations are great. They're like identifying problems, and then the solutions that are being recommended are general, like, hey, look at this, like, investigate this. I like that approach. I think that should be good goal. And so what I'm gonna do on this one is if you adopt these, it's great because we're right in the middle of the planning process, developing that design for phase 3, with council's input. So what I want to do is if you adopt it, then I'm gonna try to pass that along to our capital improvements team who's working on that project. And then we'll find a way to maybe possibly address committee comments in a staff report when we, the next time we present it to council. So.
Okay.
Very helpful.
So I would entertain a motion to approve the recommendations, fixing the, I'll call it a typo, an 8-foot radius, 12.
Flashing beacons, was that in there?
It's in there. I just reminded him to mention it. Do we have a motion, such a motion?
So moved.
All right, Jen moved.
Second it.
Reed, great. Discussion.
Great. I apologize. I missed the motion in the second.
Okay,
That was-
Jen
Jen-
moved and Reed approved
Okay.
Yeah.
to adopt the recommendations, changing the 8-foot radius to 12-foot. Okay. Any discussion? Thanks for speaking up right away. Okay, all in favor?
I,
Aye, unanimous? Oh, anybody opposed, abstaining? Okay. Thanks. Oh, now we have 4th Avenue sidewalk here, but I didn't see it on the agenda.
I was gonna mention when you were making your comments, both of your comments sounded like the previous month's agenda. Which I didn't want to interrupt you, but,
Okay, thank you. Let me figure it out.
because we also, Brandon did readdress the absence of a committee head at last meeting.
Yeah,
I did, yeah, and that's in the minutes from the last meeting, yeah.
So I think
Okay.
you just grabbed your comments.
all right. Yeah, I'm so happy we're doing that. Brandon, would you like to start or?
Yeah, well, okay, so let's, since we only have 10 minutes left and we have those 2 agenda items left. If you have any input on 4th Avenue, yeah, just let me know.
Individually or here, or both.
Yeah, let's just have a discussion about it.
And I know Radley did too, and he's not here. So that's a bummer because he's the one who requested that the agenda item be on here. So
Okay.
if we're not in a rush, maybe we should punt it to next time. But if now is the time.
We're not in a rush.
Okay.
Yeah. We've
Because I
got
do
time.
have 2 things that I do definitely want to ask before,
Yeah,
but
we haven't made any more progress on the preliminary design on that yet, so.
so let's
Sorry.
punt it and see if he can be included as well.
Okay.
Since he's the one that moves that beyond.
Okay, so I will make a note to put that on the next agenda.
Cool. So move to next month, okay? North Division crosswalk location.
So that one's pretty brief. So just an update, the school's been asking for that for a while.
For a long time, because from Cedar to Spruce, all the way from the library to Farman, you have no crosswalk.
Yeah.
And that's a long way for all those school kids, and you see people dart across the street.
Yep.
So we would like somewhere, and in this, we did a division audit with Fair and Pierce, and they put out that audit report recommending one possibly at Fur. We don't care where it's at, as long as we can maybe get one around.
Yeah, I think we're gonna try to do it at FER because that's what the audit says. And the update is, we looked at it further. I think it's gonna be more than striping, unfortunately. We're gonna have to build ADA ramps so that it's accessible if we're gonna, stripe a crosswalk at that T intersection.
So what I'm going to attempt to do is add it to our on-call concrete contract for this year. We have a contractor who can come in and make small little ADA. You know, we have money in the budget that council set aside for us to go in and make these little fixes with concrete, and I wanna try to prioritize that one. No guarantee that it's gonna get done this year, but we're gonna do, you know, that's the plan.
Since it's new for drivers, will we need additional countermeasures like signs or something else?
Yeah, we may talk about, my hope is to at least, at a minimum, put just the yellow signs that warn drivers that there's a crosswalk, you know.
Yeah.
And we'll probably start there at a minimum, depending on funding, but the
Right.
signs are pretty cheap, just.
Thanks for attaching that audit. That was actually really interesting to look at. I hadn't seen that before. Or pull that out.
It's good.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so the final item, we have 7 minutes maybe. On the agenda is the opportunity for general announcements or comments from committee members or staff during our roundtable. Does anybody have something they'd like to bring up?
We do have, if we have a striping people needing projects, all the way down, Pine Street, there's one crosswalk that's striped, really dim, you know, not very noticeable. And then there's a crosswalk that goes out of that park, with the big trees, what is that called?
Pine Street Park.
Yeah.
Pine Street Park. And there's a crosswalk and a ADA ramp that goes across the street to the other side, and there's not any crosswalk here signs, and there's no striping on that. And you know, there's a lot of kids that come and go from that park, and that one's not striped. On the corner, it's used to be striped, but there aren't any crosswalk signs.
It actually didn't used to be striped at that corner. It's never been
Oh.
striped. It was one of the first things I did when I got to the city. I had them stripe that
Okay,
crosswalk.
it had never been striped.
It had never been
Yeah,
striped.
it's just really that whole stretch, you know, the nice new sidewalk. And everything's kind of connected nicely there, except going across the street.
Yeah,
You guys didn't want one at the other place for ADA, I thought.
that was before I got here.
Oh.
So there's a difference of opinion about whether a T intersection is a mid-block crosswalk.
Oh. Cause that's where it's a T
Cause
intersection.
then there's never any crossing on Pine. Ever.
So that's my opinion. I think a T intersection is an intersection. Pedestrians have the right of way by Idaho state law to cross at all intersections, whether they're marked or unmarked. But striping the one at the northwest corner of Pine Street Park at least notifies drivers that.
Yes.
So that might be a good thing to bring as a recommendation for this committee, stuff like that.
Okay.
That can be our
those-
intersections,
Mhm.
since we have decided that a T intersection is an intersection.
Okay, anything else?
Just to add that comment, I'm gonna bring up my pet peeve. I'm not quite sure how the county got the mid-block crossing on a little chunk of division between Highway 2 and
Yeah.
Ontario with
With the
flashers and
beacons.
everything else.
They
because
paid for it.
But it's we're not supposed to have mid-block crossings, so anyway, enough said.
So it's not that we're not supposed to have mid-block crossings, it's that we're supposed to minimize mid-block crossings and put them,
Okay.
put them where there's justification for it. So my justification for allowing them to pay to install a mid-block crossing that the city owns, which I thought was a good deal, is that there's clearly a lot of heavy adult pedestrian and child pedestrian traffic, both
Going
from
from the county building.
from the county building to the new one,
Okay,
because they share, because there's administrative offices on both sides. So
well, see, I didn't know. I thought it was an absolute no mid-blocks. But what you're saying.
Well, Holly might have that opinion.
Okay, so it's not written in stone and it's so, yeah, no, it's always gray, but that's good. We
So
got something.
I think what it is no, you can't just put a striped mid block crossing and not consider additional safety measures.
Right,
I think that's where we're at.
no, sorry.
So another good example, if I have 2 minutes, okay. Another great example is Pisney, if I've mentioned this before. Okay, so they moved their campus on the west side of Boyer. There's no block, you know, that block is a mile long. It's from Aldi to Chestnut. So there's really no, I mean, there has to be a mid block. That, but we're gonna work with them to try to figure out what safety measures will be needed in order to make it, to try to get them a mid block crossing.
And I would like the intersection committee to look at, well, Fourth, now that it's two-way, people coming south on Fourth, turning onto Pine are not looking for pedestrians as soon as pedestrians are crossing. And I've almost been hit there. They're looking right, turning left, and there I am. So that needs dealing with. And the Fifth and Pine, the new light, the curb radius is so big that I feel completely unsafe on the west side leg of that if I'm crossing south. Because especially if anybody's in the parking lot, they don't see me, and then if someone's in the parking lot, they can't see me, and they're allowed to make a right turn on red. So there's a conflict point there. So those are two things, and
And the
then,
drivers are already mad because the timing on that, I waited through 4 lights the other morning and couldn't get through that. It goes so fast. It only lets like 1 or 2 cars through and then the light turns red again.
Which way were you coming?
I'm going, let's see, west.
Okay, yeah.
all right. And then, NACTO, which is the National Association of City Transportation Officials, is slowly releasing its urban bikeway design guide, and they're a membership organization, and so they don't give everything away free right away, but they have an intersection guide, and they're conservative, but they're urban. And these are things that have been implemented in a whole lot of cities, and I made copies for every. Yeah, just sort of fun to have.
Is this the one?
Oh, wait,
I
already got one of those.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
okay. And it's got the
You handed
website
me.
on it, so you can. All right, so with no further business on the agenda, this meeting is now adjourned at 1 p.m.